Well, it's been an interesting relationship with Vince McMahon. It's like, I never saw Vince as competition, but, you know, in his heyday, he saw everybody as competition.
Him being there?
Yeah.
No, they reached out to me and said that he wanted to come to the fight, and I gave him much better seats than he gave me when I went to see Ronda.
There is a lot to hate when we talk about the personal lives of Dana White and Vince McMahon, but when we talk about business, there is no doubt that they are both killers who turned both their companies into entertainment titans. The relationship between the two was never great, but behind-the-scenes stories reveal how Vince always saw the UFC as a threat, something he needed to control at all costs. In fact, according to many, he not only viewed MMA as competition, but also made a point to poke at the organization at strategic moments, always trying to destabilize it. But before, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the amazing videos we'll be releasing. An emblematic episode of this rivalry occurred when Vince attempted to prevent a UFC event featuring Mike Goldberg, a famous commentator at the time. The tactic? A dirty play involving a $100,000 offer made directly to Goldberg to not appear at the fight and instead show up on Monday Night Raw with the championship belt. Vince's idea was simple: sabotage the UFC and have Goldberg betray the organization live on WWE, just to rub it in Dana White's face. What's most interesting is that, despite the dirty plays, Goldberg chose not to accept the offer. He felt part of something bigger in the UFC, a true family, which in the past may have seemed like a really bad idea, because a few years later, Mike was fired by the UFC for no public reason and without any tribute from the company, as if he had never been part of its history.
Mike Goldberg's final UFC is this Friday. Is that true? Or?
That is true.
So what's the deal? Like, did he decide to leave, or are you like who's speaking?
You know, when these kind of things happen, I'd rather not talk about it. You know what I mean? If Mike wants to talk about it, ask Mike.
However, the rivalry between Vince McMahon and the UFC was far from just about audiences and contracts. In fact, this was just the beginning of a dispute that would turn into a true strategic battle behind the scenes, where both leaders fought for control of a key audience, the 18 to 35 age demographic, especially on Monday nights. At the time, WWE had migrated from Spike TV to USA Network, but the UFC remained on Spike TV. The next move was bolder. Vince began purchasing advertising space on Spike during UFC broadcasts, encouraging viewers to switch channels to watch Raw. Just imagine, during UFC breaks, WWE ads appeared. It was an aggressive and cunning move, ultimately forcing the UFC to change the airing day of The Ultimate Fighter to avoid direct competition with Raw. But this competitive mentality of Vince McMahon didn't stop at announcers and audiences. The next step in this story shows how far he was willing to go to undermine the UFC, and this time, the target wasn't just a simple commentator, but something much bigger: stealing a fighter directly from the octagon. This move would elevate the rivalry to a new level. During the peak of Chael Sonnen rivalry with Anderson Silva, Vince, always on the lookout for strategic opportunities, saw a chance to intervene. UFC 117 and 148 were high-impact events, and Chael was at the center of all the attention. Then, someone from WWE made an irresistible offer to Sonnen.
Was that prior to 117 or 148?
The second one.
The second
That'd
one.
be 148.
That's a real thing?
Mm-hmm.
Legit?
100%.
You're not working me.
No.
Someone called you and asked you not to show.
No call, no show. You cannot call, you cannot, and you can't show. I got two offers. Or the second one was do show and beat him and be on Raw with the belt on Monday.
No way.
Yeah.
This is insane.
And that was a much bigger offer.
But you had to win the fight.
Yeah, and I said,
Who called?
I can't tell you.
Really?
I can't tell you the whole story except that.
Okay, go ahead, fine.
He said, I said, why would they want that?
Yeah.
Why would they want that? And he said, he paused and he said to stick it up Dana White's ass.
What?
And I said, okay.
And then what?
Nothing. I didn't tell Dana. I never did anything with it.
Really?
Yeah.
But Vince's maneuvers went beyond that. He also tried to affect UFC matchmaking. A key person in this process was Joe Silva, who had long been responsible for the fights in the UFC. Joe was a true wrestling fan since childhood, but Vince, in a strategic move, apparently considered involving him in something with WWE. Although it was never clear what Joe's role in WWE would have been, his departure would have directly harmed the UFC structure. Fortunately for Dana, Joe never accepted the offer and remained with the UFC until 2016. Now, The most unbelievable point of this rivalry, Vince McMahon challenging Dana White to a fight. No, not a scripted match for WrestleMania, but a real fight. That's right, Vince wanted to face Dana in an MMA fight, something surreal even by McMahon standards.
And this, if Vince hears this, he's going to go nuts. Okay? Vince is too old.
Right.
Okay? Vince is
Right.
he's too old, which he won't think he is, and he'll go crazy.
He won't admit it.
And he wanted to do that one time. Vince wanted to fight me.
Come on.
I swear to God. Called me up and said, let's do it. Let's do it.
Finally, we can't forget to mention the issue of blocking fighters. He also did everything possible to prevent his own wrestlers from going to the octagon. CM Punk is the most emblematic example. When Punk expressed interest in appearing on UFC TV, even if it was just in a promotional capacity, Vince was against the idea. But well, at least in this one, we know how the story ended.
Yeah, you know, in life, you go big or you go home. I just like to take challenges. This was a hell of a mountain to try to climb, and I didn't get to the summit today, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give up. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop.
McMahon's mentality during the years 2011 and 2012 was that he needed to protect his empire from the growing popularity of the UFC. And this decision was a clear demonstration that he was willing to do whatever it took to prevent the success of MMA. This became a recurring strategy, where Vince not only tried to compete, but also sabotage what he considered a threat to his brand. In the early 2010s, the UFC was still struggling to establish itself in many markets. For example, Germany imposed a ban on the UFC, claiming that the events were a violation of general morality and represented a negative influence on youth. This ban lasted about 5 years until a court finally recognized the UFC as a legitimate sport. Interestingly, Vince McMahon is said to have influenced this process, attempting to ban the UFC in various regions of Europe. Oliver Kopp, who worked in WWE's marketing team and later became a commentator for the UFC in Germany, revealed how WWE used its influence to discredit the UFC. He mentioned that WWE was on the lookout for any failures of the UFC, hoping for a high-profile failure that could be used as ammunition to mock Dana White's organization. Although the UFC surpassed WWE in pay-per-view sales, this did not mean they were surpassing WWE in weekly viewership. Throughout this time, Vince managed to maintain WWE as a television titan. The relationship of respect between Dana White and Vince, as much as it exists publicly, did not translate into a fair competition behind the scenes. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. See you in the next one.